morning again. Welcome back. It's 7:39. You're listening and watching Breakfast here on GB News with me and him.
Yeah, and it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is editor of Spikes, Tom Slater, and author and broadcaster, good pal of mine, Nikki Hodgson. Good morning to you both. Again, superb round one. Let's go for round two. Tom, kick off with you. Sunday Express, page 12. Shock horror. Interest rates will help to kill the high street.
I mean, the high street, of course, has already been hammered by so much in recent years, even before the pandemic, so many hospitality venues shutting down and so on. And this rate rise from the Bank of England up to 5.25% is only hammering them further. One of the big problems that a lot of them are experiencing as well is that they took on a lot of debt during the pandemic as well, just to be able to stay above water. There's £10 billion worth of COVID loans wrapped up in hospitality venues themselves. And the consequence of all this is there's a terrifying statistic here. Since 2020, 13% of the hospitality industry has effectively shut down in this country. And a lot of these businesses, if a pub closes, it most likely will just be turned into flats. A lot of the time, you're talking about high streets being lost forever, really, and all in response to the terrible economic circumstances, which a lot of these businesses, it's something that was entirely out of their control. This isn't about them not running themselves properly. This is about external shocks as well as policies taken by the government that they needn't have taken, which have really hammered these places. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, certainly hospitality, Nikki, from the very start has been sort of hammered by COVID and all sorts of things. What could we do about this, though? I mean, we hear from people like Adam Brooks, GBNEWS contributor, landlord, VAT breaks for pubs, you know, maybe like a scaling back of business rates, because let's face it, not only is it pubs, but also the high street retailers, they can't compete with the online biggies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my husband was a hospitality business owner until recently. He got very lucky and sold his bars after the pandemic because they had basically clung on. But I think, you know, for a very long time, it has been that the issue with the landlords just putting up the rates all the time. Certainly during COVID, we dealt with that a lot. It was just that they just refused to budge on the rent, and then they were going to lose the premises. And it's like, but this is a really profitable business that will obviously come back when this is over. So they were really like short-sighted in their want to profiteer, basically. So, but I think business rates is a really good one. So many issues with staffing. Staffing is the biggest issue now, recruiting and retaining staff, being able to pay a decent wage because you're not having all these like knock-on. I mean, the thing we've got to remember is that hospitality is, what, the 5th biggest employer, technically, in Britain. We're not talking about a tiny industry or a cottage industry. We're talking about something that has lots of people that it sustains, and we have to invest more in sustaining those people because there's so many of them.
100%.
Got to invest more in lots of things. The question is, where is the money coming from at the moment?
Yeah.
And money is a big problem with the story you picked out from The Observer, where patients who are up against long NHS waiting lists, desperate for some sort of treatment, maybe a scan or something like that, are finding a new way to actually buy in.
Yeah, so patients are now using buy now, pay later schemes offered by apps like Klarna, for example. That's just one of them. There's many different services to pay for private scans, private tests, things that can be not necessarily diagnostic, but things that you initially need doing to, you know, knock something off the list. Or
Before
at
you
least
can go towards treatment, you have to do this.
Exactly. Because, you know, it's like you go, you know, for example, I have a hernia right now, I'll tell you, because I've had a baby. And the waiting list to even be seen by a consultant to look at it is a year with the NHS.
Is it?
Yeah.
Gosh.
So I've gone private and just found out I don't need anything doing about it, so they're just going to leave it. But I had to pay privately for that because I was just like, I can't just sit here for a year and
so for that, for instance, you'd need an ultrasound scan at the very least, wouldn't you? I wonder how much that would cost.
Well, they're not cheap.
You were just going, no, they're not. Anything to do with a laboratory or a scan or anything like that involves multiple staff for a start, doesn't it?
Well,
I would have thought that's very expensive to take out a buy now, pay later.
Well, exactly. This is what this is saying, that we're not looking at, you know, small fees like a private blood test, which wouldn't be a couple of £100. We're looking at things like, you know, medical scans and investigations that cost between £1,000 and £25,000, and people are taking up to that much money out to get it done. It just proves how desperate people are to be seen. Because obviously, you know, if you think you've got something really seriously wrong with you, time is of the essence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, what is 25 grand if it saves
your life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And Tom, you know, on the one hand, you know, the Observer are going to go for this brazen profiteering. It's the privates. It's shocks moving in. But Nikki absolutely nails it. If you think you have something that could be life-shortening or even worse, you would pay it. And isn't this just symptomatic of the fact that we've got this massive backlog because of COVID lockdowns, and this is where we're at, and it's kind of inevitable?
I think it is, and I think these are the problems that when you've got a dysfunctional health service, which, regardless of how you feel about the NHS, was dysfunctional but even before the pandemic, it's been exacerbated by COVID. It's been exacerbated by the lockdowns. I mean, it's one of the lines actually the junior doctors trotted out during the strikes, which I thought was very good, is that we don't have a health service, we have a waiting list. And the whole system seems to be set up to basically stop you from seeing a doctor or clinician for as long as possible.
7 million now on waiting
It's
list.
huge, and this is unprecedented.
By the time you realise, and maybe your GP has told you, there is a need for you to go for a scan or something, because you may have something serious, that's too late to even try and take out a private health insurance deal, because that would then be a pre-existing condition they wouldn't cover you for.
Yep.
No.
So, you need money, and you need it fast if you're going to do that. But buy now, pay later deals are always expensive, aren't they?
Well, the problem is, they're interest-free if you keep up to the payments. The minute you don't, the interest rate is crazy, anywhere between 27 and 34%.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, and that is the worrying aspect of this story. People are going to fall into debt very quickly if they can't keep up to those payments.
And then there's an ethical conversation, of course, because if you are desperate by nature, and financially desperate, but if you're desperate for your life, then you would pay them.
Yes, that's the trouble.
And obviously, it's what happens in America. Everybody has medical debts. Like, so many people have medical bills. Outstanding.
OK, let's look at a lovely summer or autumn of Just Stop Oil protests.
Yes, so the proverbial that just won't flush are coming back again. So 3,000 Just Stop Oil supporters are planning action over the course of October, in which they're going to try and once again kind of shut London down. One of these renewed campaigns of slow marches, as they call them, trying to block roads, bring traffic to a standstill. There's even a nice detail in here about to prepare for the assault on the capital. Just Stop Oil are hosting a mass youth training session in September, where there's going to be free vegan food and a quote-unquote legendary rave. As Nikki was saying earlier, if you have to call it legendary, it probably isn't going to be legendary. To say that the public's patience with these people has run out is a harsh understatement. I think sometimes we talk too much about their tactics, because protest is supposed to be disruptive. More people would be behind them if they believed in the cause that they were campaigning for. But the cause they're campaigning for is to make people worse off and colder with lower horizons at a time when they're already being pummeled by a cost of living crisis. So I dare say we're going to see more dissatisfaction with them on the roads and on the streets when they roll out.
And I wonder, Nikki, or indeed Anne, would the idea of a Just Stop Oil vegan rave tempt you?
Oh, yes, it sounds glorious, doesn't it? Honestly, I'd walk there.
I mean, the idea of veganism only applies to, like, certain things ingested, should I say. Certain vegans can be very selective about when they're vegan and they're raving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just leave it there.
Or indeed when they use oil.
Honestly, that's not, the idea of them paralysing London that's just terrible, isn't it? And that's what's going to happen, because they're clearly going to go ahead, even though they must sense that they're becoming rather unpopular. We're going to have to leave it there, because we want to talk a lot about the question mark in the universe. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't seen it.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, God, stick around.